We begin the current Daf, Mesechtes Bava Kama Daf Tezayin. We begin on the bottom line of Tesvav Mabeis, where the Gemara is in the middle of a discussion from the previous Mishnah. The Gemara had a question. On the one hand, it said, Hashem Mo'edis Lechel. So obviously, if the previous Mishnah mentioned, because it was talking about 5 Taman, 5 Mo'adim, if it said Shein is more to eat, obviously we talk about Chatzar Nizik, because we know a Shein is only Chayiv, let alone Mud, which Shein is always Mud, is only going to be in the Chatzar Nizik. Problem is, we said, Behema is not a Mud, meaning Karen, to pay all of it, but meaning it pays half of it. Well, that would seem to be like the Rabbanon, who say that Meshuna, Karen, B'chatzar Nizik, only pays Chatzar Nizik. The Mishnah says, Shar HaMazik B'shus HaNizik is one of the 5 Mu'adin that pays Nezik Shalom. That's like Rabbi Tarfon, who says, Karen B'chatzar Nizik. The approach that the Gemara said was, yes, Reisha Rabbanim is Sefer Rabbi Tarfon. And now the Gemara is going to move on to another approach to try to say that no, it can be totally like a opinion. It's strong throughout the entire world. So we discussed in the Mishnah Taman Mu'adim. This Chatzin Nezik, Megufa and Mud pays Nezik Shalom. The Machlikas Tanoim. Victim's domain, is it the classic Chatzin Nezik or is it maybe Nezik Shalom? B'nei Tarabis, regarding the status of these wild animals when they are domesticated. Mention, which gets us into a little Agadic teachings. Ari doiris v'toirif. The difference if a line is doiris or toirif, which means does it eat it that's live, or does it first discussion regarding does that make it abnormal or normal? Keren and some of the other mazikim. And then the Gemara gets us at the end of the daf regarding this Agadic discussion regarding Chizkiyah, Melech, and his Levaya. So our daf begins, as we mentioned in the Mishnah, and we mentioned those which are tam, which are chatzin nezik, which those are all the old talodas of Keren. Shmuel had explained that obviously we told about b'shus hanizik, and because we're talking about one of the 5 mu'adin was shein, which is only chayv in b'shus hanizik. So we're talking about Keren b'shus hanizik, and the Mishnah is indicating that it's only tam chatzin nezik, which Keren b'chatzin nezik is going to pay chatzin nezik. The problem is that when you mention the mud of nezik shalom, one of the mu'adim was shar mazik b'shus hanizik. So that seems to indicate that it's going to be nezik shalom. So according to Shmuel, we said, yes, Reisha Rabbanim is Sefer Rabbi Tarfon. You have to say that the Reisha, which is indicating that even shar keren b'shus hanizik is going to be chatzin nezik, that's the Rabbanim. The Sefer that he says that shar mazik b'shus hanizik is when the 5 mu'adim is going like Rabbi Tarfon, who holds that it's nezik shalom b'shus hanizik. That's where we begin. Now, Rabbi Lazar, last line says Vav and Beis. Rabbi Lazar, Mishmei Ravam, he wants to say no. First, he's going to try to say like one Tana, and then it's going to end up being like the other Tana. But he says, I could tell you, Kul Rabbi Tarfoni, the entire Mishnah is Rabbi Tarfon. How so? So he explains, as we had mentioned, this sophisticated cases of B'shus HaNizik, which Chase actually points out, seemingly from here, we should have answered the question we had from Daf Yudalad. Be that as it may, the Gemara is saying, Reisha is not by a full-fledged B'chatzar HaNizik. And that's why we're saying, even though it's going like a Tarfon, who again, remember, who holds Keren B'shus HaNizik is Nezik Shalom, no, it's not going to be Nezik Shalom because it's not a full-fledged Chatzar HaNizik. Wait, so why are you saying that you chayv on Shein B'regel? One of the modern you're saying is Shein. Shein is only B'shus HaNizik. Because it's b'chatzam yuchedes lepeiros le'echad. It's a quarter that's designated for the fruits. Only one party was allowed to have the fruits over there. That was the nizik. Now there's different girsayis over here. It's either like ulazel l'shvachim. Shaisis brings both girsayis. In previous and Navidal, he also said it should be v'loy l'zel l'shvachim. It gets sophisticated in the lumdis about that regarding if you have permission to bring in your oxen, could you still consider it as b'shus hanizik for the peiros? If I had rights to bring in my ox, that's basically the discussion in places. But be that as it may, at least the way our Girs is, the way Rashi is explaining is the lagabi shein havelachatz hanizik. Regarding the food, what's being consumed, the only one that permission to have food over there, which is really what shein is, of eating the food, was only the victim. Oh, so regarding the shein it's B'Shus HaNizik. Therefore, it's going to be one of the more other mentioned in our Mishnah. But L'gabi Keren, it's only going to be Chatzin Nezik, not more. Why? Because for oxen, it's the domain of both of them. So it's going to be like Havi Rishas Harabim. It's going to be like the public domain. And therefore, even though Reb Tarfon is mentioned in the end of the Mishnah that tells us that Mazik B'Shus HaNizik is going to be Nezik Shalom, but that's only when it's B'Shus HaNizik. This case is so interesting. It's Rishus HaNizik for Shane, but it's not Rishus HaNizik for Karen. That's how the Gemara Ravina wants to tell us that the Rebbe Lazar wants, and Neimer Rab wants to tell us that it's going to be all Reb Tarfon. The problem is, Amar Reb Zakana, Reb Kahana says, Amrit l'shmai dekemid Reb Zvid Nada. I said about this teaching, this pshat in front of Reb Zvid Nada. Amali says, what? How could you say the Mishnah is all like Reb Tarfon? But there's a different problem you run into. Because what do we say in the Mishnah? We said, Hashem mu'edes lechel esarola. The mazik of Shane is mu'ed, that it consumes what's fit for it. Ooh, wait a second. Rola in? What's fit for it, yes, like in other words, what's normal for an animal to eat? Peiros, vegetables, yurakas, all these things. But the diuk is she'in rola, what's not fit for an animal to eat, let's say clothing or some type of a bowl or whatever, that loy. That is meshuna, that's abnormal, and then you're not going to be considered as a mu'ud, then you're going to pay chatzin nezik. Wait a second. Reb Tarfon, if the Mishnah is going like Reb Tarfon, most definitely, you just told me before that regarding Shane, it is Rishus HaNizik, because it's designated for the Nizik only that he was allowed to have peiros. So it's interesting, there's a lot of layers of lumdis over here, but Ha'amr, you said, because it really is Shane, but it's Meshuna, which makes it Karen, whatever, but like Gabi, that it's, the Gemara is saying, Meshuna Karen B'chutz HaNizik, what's abnormal with Karen, when it's in the Chutz HaNizik, Nezik Shalom Mishalom. So even though if you want to qualify it, it's not Rishus Harabim, it's really, that's the whole lumdis over here, but L'kalape Shane, even it's abnormal, so you qualify it as Karen, but Karen B'Shus HaNizik, it is B'Shus HaNizik, because regarding eating, which is what the animal is doing, which is what Shane is, it is considered as B'Shus HaNizik. Well, Kaponim, so when you have Karen B'Shus HaNizik, so why you tell me that only Ro'lo it's going to be Nezik Shalom, but in Ro'lo it's going to be Chatzin Nezik? No. Keren B'Chatz HaNizik, if it's like Reb Tarfon, should pay Nezik Shalom. So how are you telling me that it's like Reb Tarfon? So the Gemara says, you're right. Let's go the other way. It can't be like Reb Tarfon. I can tell you the whole Mishnah is like one Tana. The other way, it's like Rabban. Now, there's Rabban, how do we understand the Sefer? The Sefer is difficult. Rabban don't hold Keren B'Chatz HaNizik is Nezik Shalom. We had a clear-cut teaching that said that Sheramaz B'Shus HaNizik is Misham Nezik Shalom. That's not like Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, wait a second, this word's missing, and let me explain to you. This is how you're supposed to read the Mishnah. Chamisha, and this gets us really a lot of lines over here. It keeps on repeating it in different ways. Chamisha Tamenhen. There's 5 types of tam, which Olo Taladas of Keren. Negicha, Negifa, Nishicha, Revitza, Be'ita. These are all different types of Kamanas Lahazik with its body parts. Now, Vimho Adu, if it was warned once, twice, and now it does it again, Chamishasan Mu'adun. These 5 are Mu'adun. So like Rashi explains, that's what, because there's different ways of interpreting. When we said Chamisha Mu'adun, the simple understanding, which what we said in the previous daf, is that it was referring to the 5 different types of categories of Shein and Regel and Adam and Keren B'Shus HaNizik. No, that's not what the Mishnah meant. It means these 5, when they get warned a few times, they become 5 Mu'adin. So how's the Gemara translating what the Mishnah then goes on to say Hashem Mu'edis Lechel, etc.? That's not going into number 5. The Mishnah is just saying like this: B'Shein B'Regel, and then regarding eating and regarding walking, Mu'adim Mitchilasan. They're mu'id from the beginning. This that it says further B'Sher HaMu'id and Sher HaMazik B'Shus HaNizik. What the Mishnah means to say is going back on what we said before. Meaning it's qualifying this that we're saying of Shein and Regel. And where is Shein and Regel mu'id? B'Chatz HaNizik, in the victim's domain. So interestingly, according to this pshat, what originally was two different mu'adin, which was shar hamazik, or shar mu'id, which we were considering as those 5 tamin that become mu'id, and we thought shar hamazik b'shus hanizik was another type of category like Reb Tarfon. No, the Gemara at this point is reading it totally different. It's reading shar hamu'id as like just like a neutral word that's like saying, and shar hamazik b'shus hanizik, when a sheni regel chayiv is going to be when it's b'shus hanizik. It sounds like it's like read together, shar hamu'id, which is what sheni regel or maybe Karen mu'id, but be that as it may, it's going to be b'shus hanizik. That's what it sounds like from the Gemara, the way Rashi translates at this point in time. So nothing to do. It has nothing to do with Keren b'chatzar hanizik. It's just qualifying this added on. After we said the 5 muadin, we said also there are others that muadin tchalas to shein regel, and we're shein regel chayv. It's b'shus hanizik. The Masik of Ravina asks on this pshat. He says, "Wait a second. This can't be what you're saying. That our Mishnah, when it says that shar maz b'shus hanizik, doesn't really mean Keren. It really means shein regel, and just telling you shein regel is chayv on b'shus hanizik, because there's a Mishnah later on Chavdal Amud Beis in Perek Ketzad that explains all the mu'adin of the first parak. And in that explanation, it says also, Shar Hamazik B'Shus HaNizik, that explains this line of the Mishnah that you're trying to interpret as like a qualifier in Shein Regel. It says, and what's the case of the damaging shar in the victim's property? So that's what it goes to explain it over there. But one thing says the Gemara, says Ravina, if you say that our Mishnah was referring to Keren Tam B'Shus HaNizik, that it's going to pay Nezik Shalom in our Mishnah. So Mishum Hachi, that's why it explains in the second parak, Ketani Kates, that explains how so. And what does it say over there? It mentions the Machlekes of Tavin Rabbanon, which is the halach of Keren Tam B'Shus HaNizik. So it makes sense that it's explaining that. But Eli Amrit, but if it's like you want to say right now, the Lo Yariba, our Mishnah in this parak didn't talk about Keren Tam B'Shus HaNizik. You're reading the words wrong. Shar Hamazik b'shus hanizik is referring to just explaining what shein regel is. Then my ketzad. So then, what are you qualifying? What are you going on? The second parak, that Mishnah was only qualifying Mishnah in this parak. We didn't talk about it. Obviously, you're trying to distort the translation over here. Shar Hamazik b'shus hanizik means it means the case of Keren Tam b'shus hanizik. We're back to the question. That sounds like Reb Tarfon, and the Reishi you're telling me is like the Rabbanan. So Elam Ravina, rather, Ravina comes out like this. He says, I could tell you it's one Tana. But there's words missing, and this is how you have to read the Mishnah. Chamisha Tamin Hain, there are 5 types of Tam. Like we said, not to gore, not to shove, not to bite, not to squat, not to kick. These are all Tamin. If they were warned 3 times, Chamisha Mu'adin. These 5 become Mu'ad, and that's what Rashi again explained and stresses. That's what the Mishnah means when it says Chamush Mu'adin in the Mishnah. It's referring to these 5. Again, not like the simple understanding when you read the Mishnah that it's going on Sheina Regel as 2, and then Adam as 3, and Shem as 4, and Shem Mu'ad as 5. No, it's going on those 5 times and becoming Mu'adin. Then the Mishnah goes on to say, okay, and then the B'Shem Regel Mu'ad Mitchalasan, you have then not on the number 5. It's just mentioning, now that we mentioned that there's 5 Mu'adin of Karen, there's also Sheina Regel Mu'ad from the beginning. Vezehu shar hamu'id. Meaning, as Rashi explains, this that we said that v'muhadu, if they were warned, those 5 are mu'adin, that's the shar hamu'id that's mentioned in the Torah. So that's really qualifying from what we said before of the 5 tamin becoming mu'ad. Then the Mishnah goes on and says, v'shar hamaz b'shus hanizik, and the damaging ox in the victim's property, that is machlekes Tav Rabbanan in the second parak. And then it goes on to mention Adam. So really what the Gemara is answering is that there's no stira. Because first our Mishnah was just qualifying like the opinion of the Rabbanan. And then, as it mentions the last case, it wasn't saying, again, this Chasur Mechsra, obviously over here, it's really a Shvach HaTeretz. But like, we're saying that when we said Shar Hamaz B'Shus HaNizik, we are referring to that case. But we didn't say that we hold that that's Mu'adin, because then that would be, again, Reish Rabbanan B'Sefer Tavin. It's just that, and that's a Machlekes of Tavin Rabbanan. And then it goes on to say, and then there are other mu'adin that are similar to these, which that's the end of the Mishnah comes to explain. There's Hazev, the wolf, Ari, the lion, Vadav, the bear, Vabardless, which you can explain shortly what that is, Va'nomar, and the leopard, Va'nachash, and the snake. That's the way you have to explain the Mishnah. So basically, when we said the case, we weren't saying it like that's a definitive opinion. That's a case, that's a machlekes tanoim. And Tanoim Chazim in the Brisa that says the same thing. Chamisha Tamahim, there's 5 innocent ones. What if they were warned? You see clearly the Brisa is saying it. That's the Chamishas Mu'adin. Those are the 5 Mu'adin. And then B'Shem Regel Mu'adin, Mitchilas and Regel Amud from the beginning. And B'Zehu, going back on what we said before, Esher Amud, when it gets warned 3 times, that's Esher Amud mentioned in the Torah. And then it goes on. Esher Amaz, which is a Nizik, is Machlekes Reb Tava Rabbanan. Again, it's not a definitive case. It's saying that that's a Machlekes. And then then there are similar types that are mu'ud always. You have azeh, vari, hadoy, vanoma, vabat, these wild animals. They're also like sheina regel are always going to be considered as a mu'ud. Now another version, again, it's all the same idea, just saying it. First we explained it in the Mishnah, then we brought a Bryce, and now we're going to say ikudurama lo minima. Now those who pose it as a contradiction. On the one that's not says in the Mishnah, chamisha tam chamisha mo'adin, that is only 5 tam and 5 mo'adin. Besulaka? Really? Are there no others? But there are others. You have all these wild creatures. Shani, the Gemara answers, there's words missing in this, I have to read it. It's not saying Chamishim Mu'adin are the 5 that we mentioned of Adam Amazik and Shein Regel and all that. You're right, that's the way you would normally read. That's how we said on the previous stuff. But that's not what it means. It's missing Bachitani. It's how we answered before, just it's being presented in a different way. Chamisha Tamim, there's 5 innocent ones. B'mu'adim, they become mu'ad. Chamishas mu'adim, they're 5 mu'adim. And then we're mentioning b'shem regel mu'ad mitchilasan, b'seh shar mu'ad, going back on those 5. B'shar maz b'shas niz machlis d'abrabban, b'yesh mu'ad machem kitzvelu, and the others. Hazeh vari adeva nama babat v'nachash. In other words, don't ask me why you're not counting the wild animals as the 5. You count the shein regel. Why don't you count the wolf? That's not the point. The shein regel is also not from the 5. The 5 were those tamin that become mu'ad, as we explained before. And then we just mentioned other ones, and those are also mentioned in the Mishnah as other ones that are mu'ad mitchilas. Now, the Gemara goes to one of those 5 tamen that we mentioned is v'le'lirbites, and not to go ahead and squat, meaning what's not going to be mu'ad mitchilasai is squatting, because we said that that's a form of keren, because it's doing it to smash. It's like little kids like popping the bub. It's not. It just wants to smash it, and therefore it's not going to be a mu'ad. Now, Amar Rabbalasi qualifies his teaching. He says, "L'shamar didn't learn to sell pachin gedolim." That's only if it's large jugs, which is abnormal. So that's going to be considered as a telod of keren. A pachin getanim, but if Yaakov Avinu left his small jugs over there, orchehu. So then it's going to be considered as normal for the animal to squat on it. And if it squats on it in the Rishus Rabbim, it's going to be putter. And if it's going to be in the Rishus Nizik, Michayim Nezik Shalom, because it's a Tailada of Yegel. So it's so interesting when you can see the same thing being done, just if it's a big jug or a small jug, it's a totally different mazik with totally different halachas. And the reason very simply is it urche, is it normal, is it making it regular, or is it abnormal, and therefore would be a Tailada of Karen. So it says, let's say we should support the Blaz's teaching from the following brisa. The brisa says, a behema is considered as a mu'ad, as forewarned, that when it goes in this normal way, it's going to break things. That's going to squash people, animals, and vessels. Now, our Mishnah said that it's not mu'ad to smash. So how do you resolve it? Oh, obviously that the Mishnah was talking about large vessels. And therefore, that's considered abnormal. The Bryce is talking about small vessels and small children and small animals, and you see that you consider as a mu'ad to do that. So you see that because it's a telada of regel, you see that you have to inherently explain the Brysa talking about to give the answer we gave. The Gemara says no, not necessarily. Dilma, maybe this that we learned in the Brysa that you're considered a mu'ad as an animal to squash. It's not with squatting. It's maybe minat sad. It's as it's going, and on the side there's vessels. It's going to squash it like Bilam's foot between the animal and the wall. And that's what we said on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, that if it damages with its body as it's walking, that's a telad of regel. But not necessarily that it would prove this answer that we gave, that when it's sitting down, that pachin kitanim would be considered as a telad of regel. That's one version of this teaching. Now the problem is, but however, the Gemara says, the others say, actually no. Amar Rabbi Elazar says, not like we said. Don't say that this halacha only applies to the of Keren, that it's abnormal by large jugs, not normal for it to sit in it and smash it. but small jugs it's normal and therefore it'd be telada of regel. No, this version says no, even small jugs is not normal. In this halacha of roivetz of being a telada of regel of Karen would even be by small jugs, not just by big jugs. Now, according to this version, now instead of saying we support, it's meisvei. The Gemara asks from the following brisa. We said what's considered muad is to squash people and animals and vessels is normal and muad for an animal. Well, that's roivitz. I thought you said that roivitz is no matter how small, it's still going to be a telada of karen and tam, not muad. This is not a kasha. Maybe it's someone from the side as it's walking. That's muad versus sitting on it. Now, those who actually pose it as a contradiction. On the one hand, we learned in the Mishnah that says that an animal is not muad to squat. By the time we learned the Brisa that an animal is muad that it squats and smashes a person or an animal or vessel, it is considered as a muad. Says like kasha, it's not difficult. That kan in our Mishnah that said that it's not normal, that it's going to be Karen, is bepaching gedam, is by large jugs. Kan bepaching getanim. Here in the Brisa it says it is going to be muad, is by small jugs, which again, that's going to be like the first version said it, that it's going to be considered as urche, and therefore would be considered as a telada of regel. Now, we said in the Mishnah, all the wild animals, hazeh, vari, v'chulu, they are the vildechayas, they're always going to be considered as a muad for damage, which actually Taisus says, interestingly, it's not for all damage that they consider as muad. It's just each one in what's normal for him. This is the Masa Banachash. What's normal for him, as the Gemara is going to explain. Like a ze'ev is to do taraf, which is to first kill and then eat. That's how a wolf is. A lion is actually he eats it when it's alive, or if he kills it, but to leave it for later. But something that's not normal for the wild animal, for example, let's say if a lion kills it and then eats it, or any other abnormal damages, so that would not be considered as a muad. It actually would pay chatzin nezek. And it's only what's normal for that wild animal would pay nezek shalom, and that would be dafke b'chatzar nezek, but Rishus Rabim would be potter because it's shein b'Rishus Rabim, as Shmuel says in the Gemara, that even the snake who doesn't have any pleasure from his bite, as the famous Gemara Tainis Tav Ches says, or like for the Baal Lashon Hara, all the wild animals come to the snake and say, "What hanod do you get?" But says Tais, it's still urch, it's still normal for the snake to do it. So it would be like regel, and you'd be potter Rishus Rabim, and it would not be like Karen once it becomes a muad, because even though it's intending to damage. But says from the fact that it's counted with all the other ones, obviously it's considered like more like Shana Regel versus that of. So it's interesting.
See it afterwards. You don't know how.
That's going to be the Gemara I'm going to discuss. How do we know? Like you're telling me what exactly. But be that as it may, in general they're considered always as mood for what's their norm. So that one of the animals mentioned was a bardless. So the Gemara says my bardless. What is a bardless? My view this is nafriza. Okay, it doesn't really get us any further. My nafriza. Rav Yisrael says appa, that they expect us to know, which is like some type of a hyena or polecat or whatever it is. Now, Meisver, the Gemara says, how could you say that it's an appa? Because he says af, meaning he's adding on those that we said in the Mishnah, which one of them is this bardalus, and he adds on also hatzavaya. Now, Rabbi Lazar says afa nachash, also the snake. Now, the thing is, Rabbi Yisrael explains elsewhere that what's tzavaya? Zu Appa. Now, for the fact that Rabbi Meir is adding on Appa, obviously Bardalus is not Appa. So how could you say that it's a hyena if Rabbi Meir is adding on the hyena? So Zimah Leikash is not difficult because Kan Rabbi Meir is B'tzavaya Zachar. He's a male hyena. And Kan, our Mishnah is B'tzavaya in the cave is by the female one. As Rashi's preferred interpretation, Rabbi Meir is adding on the male hyena. And you're right, they're both called Appa. So, but why did Rameh have to add on the male versus the female? Then by all animals, you didn't add on the male. So the more explains, because the time you learn the Brisa, Tzavaya Zachar, the male hyena, or again the polecat, whichever one it is, after 7 years, Nasa Atalef, becomes a bat. So like Rashi explains, since it changes into another creature, we had to explicitly add it on to say that it's always going to be a muad, because it's something different than the female version. And Atalef Lachar Shebeshanim, a bat after 7 years, Nasa Arpad. I don't know if article translates that what that is, but Arpad Lachazayin Shalom Nasa Kimush. An Arpad after 7 years becomes nettle, and Kimush Lachashav Shalom Nasa Chayach becomes a thorn, and Chayach Lachashav Shalom, the thorn after 7 years Nasa shade becomes a demon. So there's obviously some interesting evolutionary process over here. And Sheder Shel Adam, once we talk about things transforming, so Sheder Shel Adam Lachash Sheva Shanim Nasa Nachash. A person's spine after 7 years becomes a snake. Now, says the Gemara, B'hanamili, when did we say that? I mean, this sounds like in the grave. B'hanamili, when did we say this? It's the Lekara b'moidim. Only if he didn't bow down by moidim. So Tosfos Amud Beis actually says, what's going on over here? It says because there's a mitzvah to bow down by moidim. And when you bend upwards, you're supposed to go straight down. When you bend up, you're supposed to bend up like a snake, as the Gemara teaches in Berachot Daf Yomi. So this is midah connected midah. Since he didn't bow down appropriately by moidim, so and that's probably also related to the kafur taiva of a snake, also like the nachash hakadmoni. But he becomes like a snake, and that's the punishment that the disgrace for him that it becomes like a snake. That's one pshat Tosfos brings from the Gilyon. He brings others that explain that since it says in the Medrash that there's a bone in the spine of a person, which we all know as Malava Malka is supposed to feed that luz bone, but that from that he's going to be formed la'asad lava in the future. That bone is hard and strong so much that even the fire cannot burn it. And now, when that bone becomes a snake, it doesn't live forever. And that comes because he doesn't bow down by moedim. But Tosfos says it's not svar to say he's going to get such a punishment for such a sin, because Kol Yisrael Yeshel L'Cheg Lo'im Haba. Tosfos doesn't like that pshad so much. Be that as it may, but that's what no. Tosfos says that's the vard. The vard of becoming a snake is now it's not going to live. It's not going to live forever. That's what Tosfos Amud Beis says. It's not going to live forever now that it's a snake. And he says that's a little bit much for not bowing down the right way by moedim. But you could understand the havmin at least, because Haidah is Yehudi is all about Haidah and moedim, and that's what a yid is. And without that, you have no schus akiyim. Kol Yisrael. What's Yisrael? Is Yehudi? You have no schus akiyim. Okay, akapanim. So the Gemara goes to explain now. Omamar. We had quoted in the Braiser, he says Afet Savoya, which we explained is the male version of the Yina, which we said already the polecat, but it's the male version. Okay. We continue to Beis, and Rabbi Lazar he says Afa Nachash. He said, also the snake. The problem with that wording is, says the Gemara, from saying that Af, it sounds like Rabbi Lazar agrees that the other ones are also Mu'adin. But now we learn in the Mishnah it's not that case. Rabbi Lazar he said Bizmanchein B'nei Tarbus, he said that if they were domesticated, all those wild animals are not considered mu'ad. It's only about nachash mu'ad l'olam. It's only the snake that's always going to be considered as a mu'ad, but the other one's not. So the Gemara says, you're right, you have to read it not af, but rather nachash. He doesn't hold also the snake, he holds only the snake. That's the only one that's always going to be mu'ad mitchilasan. Now, related to qualifying the mazikin of our Mishnah, of the wild animals, so Amar Shmuel says like this. A lion in the street, Daras v'achal. Daras means it doesn't kill the animal, it eats it alive. Potter, the owner of the lion, Barnum and Bailey, Mr. Barnum and Bailey, they're going to be exempt because it's normal for a lion to do that, and that's Shein B'Reshus Sarab. So you mean Potter. So Mr. Barnum is not going to have to pay for his lion eating your shepsela that was in the street. Now, but interestingly, if Tara v'achal, if let's say the lion first killed the sheep and then ate it, Mr. Bailey is going to be chayiv, he's going to have to pay because that's not normal. A lion doesn't usually kill then eat. He eats it alive. We don't get to see this when we go to the zoo now, but we don't get such entertainment maybe on Channel 13 or whatever, like see a National Geographic. But it's not normal for it to kill then eat. And it's therefore to Toloda of Keren, and Keren pays chatzin nezik b'shus rabim, as the Gemara explains. Doris v'achal pater, if it goes and it eats it alive, the owner is going to be exempt. It's normal for it to kill, to eat alive. It's like eating fruits and vegetables. It's like the mazik of shein ram that you can be pater. Taref, to kill it first, it's not normal, and therefore you can be chayiv as keren. Says the Gemara, really? Remember the Treifa, is that really to say that to first kill, then eat lav orchihu is not normal? So what's classic always in the Gemara is the Gemara doesn't ask and say, well, we just saw yesterday in the street. Most time we're going to ask them psukim, that we'll bring psukim that will show what's the reality. But it says a pasuk in Sefer Nachum. It says, Aryeh Toirif, the lion is Toirif, which again means to first kill before it eats, B'dei Geireisav, that it has enough food for its young cubs. Well, obviously we see that it is Toirif, which means to kill it first. Says Yomai, yeah, B'shvil Geireisav. That's because of its young cubs. It's normal for it to kill, to bring, and to put it away. But to kill it and then eat it itself, that's not normal. That would be keren, and then you'd be chayiv. But it says there in the pasuk, the Gemara continues to ask and says, wait a second. But it says, u'mechanek lilvi oisav, that it strangulates it for the female. Obviously, it's normal for it to kill first. So the Gemara says, no, that's b'shvil oisav. That's because of its lover. For its the female, it goes and it kills it, not for itself. But it says within the pasuk v'mali terev chaydav, that it fills up all its prey that it killed in its storage places. Says b'shvil chaydav. That's normal for it to kill and to bring to put it away and store for a rainy day. But to eat it right away right after it kills it, like the case of Shmuel, that's not normal, and therefore you have to pay chatzin nezik. But it says in the pasuk umay noisav treifa that in its abode are these killed animals. It says that's b'shvil umay noisav. That's because of storing it away. But the Gemara says, but Tanya in the Brisa says like this: that also a wild animal that goes into a private property, tarfa behema, if it kills the animal, and then v'achla basa eats the meat, mishalim nezik shalom, it pays the full damages. Now, from the fact that it's going to pay in the chatzah nezik shalom, obviously that it means to say that it's normal, and it's a telad of shein, and therefore you're only going to be chayved in Rishus HaYachid, but that means to say in Rishus HaRabim, you should be potter. Well, that's not like Shmuel, who said that if it kills and then eats, it's going to be chayim in Rishus HaRabim because it's keren. So Gemara says, no, we're talking about where it killed the animal to put it away for later. That's normal for it to kill it. So how could you say that? It says it ate the meat. So this is related to the question that you asked me before, where it changed its mind and decided to eat. Someone's making food for later. Say, no, I got an appetite. I'm going to eat it now. How are you ever going to know then what it changed its mind? But moreover, the bigger question is the Shmuel Nami. Shmuel, that he said that if it kills and then eats, it's going to be chayiv mishras ram because it's keren, which is meshuna. Why would you be chayiv? Dimahachihu. Maybe it really killed it because it wanted to put it away, and then it changes mind to eat, which that means say it's urche. That's normal for it to do, and then it's shein. You should be potter in shas ram. How can you be mechayivim? Maybe my wild animal, maybe my lion changed his mind. Maybe he wasn't hungry and then he changed his mind and then he got hungry. So Rav Nachman Yitzchak says no, it's doesn't kitani. In other words, just that the Brisa said that tarfa behema va'achla basar, we were reading it as one case. If it killed the animal, then they ate the meat. It's mechayiv nezik shalom. That was the question on Shmuel. No, those are two different teachings. Number one, tarfa l'niach. If it kills it to leave it, that's going to be normal because it doesn't eat it. Or or if it eats it alive, mishalim nezik shalom. It's going to pay nezik shalom. So therefore, it's not a difficulty on Shmuel. Or another pshat you could say, Ravina he says that the truth is, it is normal even for the lion to kill and then to eat. But wait a second. Kikar Shmuel, when did Shmuel said that you're going to be chayv mishras harabim? Why would you be chayv mishras harabim then? I thought if it's normal, it should be shein and you should be patur mishras harabim. Shmuel was talking about bari tarbus. He was talking about a domesticated lion. He was talking about Mr. Barnum's lion, who is so friendly and everyone could come and pat him on the head. Oh, Valiba de Rabbi Lazar. It's going like Rabbi Lazar. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Lazar was the opinion held that you could have a domesticated wild animal that's going to be treated as abnormal if it does kill. So it's keren. Oh, if it's keren, that's why you're going to, according to Shmuel, pay chatzi nezik in Rishus HaRabim. So you must say, if that's the case, well, I understand that. Then even if it eats it alive, in the street should also be l'chayiv because you're telling me it's abnormal for it to kill anyone. It's domesticated, so it should be keren tam. So Eliezer says the Gemara, no, you're right. Most definitely the Ravina lava Shmuel Idmar. This whole shot we wanted to say right now of Ravina cannot be going on Shmuel, as we just said. It wouldn't make sense because then what would be the difference between Tarfa and Darsa? Ella rather that he must be going that if you could explain the teaching of Ravina, it's Amasnita. He's going on the Mishnah, and Ravina was saying Ki to Amasnita when we learned in the Brisa that it's going to be Nezik Shalom, it's not because that it's normal for it to be tyrif, to kill it and then to eat it, because even Bari Tarbus, that you could explain it even by a domesticated lion, and we're going like Rabbi Lazar Malab Orche that says it's not normal, and therefore that's why you're going to be chayiv chatzi nezik. So the Gemara says, wait a second, if that's the case, the Masnitin, the Bryce is that how is it like Ravina chatzi nezik by l'shlumim, but the Bryce says that you chayiv nezik shalom. So the Gemara says, yeah, da'yayid. We're talking about where you already warned it a few times, so it's a mood. So it says, but if it's a talad of Karen, my hide the Ketani law, and why did the Mishnah later on Daf Yud Testament base teach this halacha gabe talad of the Shein? In the halacha of Shein, it mentioned this halacha. But according to you, that you're qualifying this as a Rabbi Lazar, as a domesticated lion, so then it's all a derivative of Karen because it's not normal for it to damage. It's more kasha. It's not a tiyufta, but it is a difficulty if you're explaining it the way you are. That because it's not a tiyufta, because it is being done with its teeth, and it is a type of eating. So you can laden that it would be mentioned by Shem, but still the Gemara finds that a difficulty if it's really a derivative of Karen. It shouldn't have said it in the Mishnah later on if you test with Shane. Should have mentioned it the way you're explaining of Ravina qualifying the Brisa that this halacha is talking about tarfa behem of achla basar is specifically because of Rabbi Lazar's teaching of a domesticated wild animal. Well, that's really a chiyuv of keren and not of shein. Now, the next Mishnah, where the Mishnah continues the theme of the previous Mishnah. We spoke about 5 tam and 5 mu'adin. So now the Mishnah qualifies mabed tam lamud. What is the difference between a shar in its first few times that it's considered innocent, a whole, and then mud when it was from the word of edus of a warned, and now it's going to be a mud. Ella, the difference is shatam misham chatzinezim megufay. 2 differences. One is that the tam pays only half the damages, and it's only can be collected from the body of the damaging ox. A mud misham nezik shom and aliyah, but the mud pays number 1 the full damages, and it's also from the pocket of the owner. Meaning, even if the goring ox is not worth the amount of the damage, by mu'id it says yishalm shar tachas ashar. You have to pay an ox for an ox, and it doesn't say that it's collected only from the body of the goring ox to be collected. In contrast, by tam it says that it's relevant only to how much is the value of the damaging ox. So the Gemara says, but my aliyah, what's the terminology of aliyah that you pay min aliyah? Just say that he has to pay from his pocket. What's aliyah? So Rabbi Lazar says it's also telling us it has to be from the best, the choices of his properties when you pay for damages. Like it says the pasuk in the Daf Yomi, Chizkiyahu was laid down with his fathers, and he was buried b'malei in the best of the graves of the sons of David. Where Rabbi Lazar says b'malei means it means that he was by the best of the family. That's who he was buried by. Manenu David Shloimy is buried near David and Shloimy. But you see that this word aliyah means from the choices. Now, once we're discussing this, so the Gemara quotes another pasuk. It says that they buried him in his burial place, which is actually referring to Asa Melech Yehuda. That they buried him in the burial place that they dug for him in the city of David. And they lay him down b'mishkav in the bed. Ashamali b'samim v'zanim. It was full of fragrant spices and zanim. So Gemara says, "My b'sam v'zam." What does it mean that there was b'samim, fragrant spice, and zanim? Rabbi Lazar Amar, he says it's zine zine. Zine means different types, like we find in Bereshis Aleph. Liminehu is translated as liznoihu. So there were many different types of fragrant spices. A different Shmuel ben Nachmani, he says actually it refers to besamim shekol mariach ben boli de zima. It's such fragrant spice that whoever smells it comes to lewd thoughts. And that's what zine is from znus. That's what type of besamim it is. Now, again, continuing on this theme, so the Gemara quotes a pasuk in Yirmiyah. He said, Yirmiyah, kikaru shucha l'lechteni, when they dug a pit to trap me, upachim tamnu l'ragli, and traps they hid for my leg, which is referring to Yirmiyah Hanavi. So what's this referring to? Rabbi Lazar Amar, and again, this is another teaching from Rabbi Lazar. That's why we're bringing it over here. He says, shechashdu mizayna. They suspected him from a harlot. Why is that? So Taisus brings that Yirmiyah was a kayin, and the zayin is forbidden to a kayin. So that's the trap that we're referring to, as the Gemara is going to explain in a second, how you see anything about a zayin in the pasuk. They suspected him from a married woman. So it says, when Bishlam we understand the kind of one that says they suspect him from a zayin. It says in the pasuk in Mishlei. It says it says that a harlot is a deep pit, and that's what it says, that they would try to trap him with a pit. So according to the one that says they suspected him from a married woman for adultery, so my sheikha, or some have the girsa my zaina. What's the zaina? What's the pit? I mean, where do you see anything about married woman? So Gemara says, being a married woman is out of the category of acting like a harlot. That's the idea, and therefore it would also be alluded that way too. But then the Gemara says, you understand, according to the one that says they expect him from a married woman, and it says a pasuk in Yirmiyah, and you Hashem, you know, it's called tzasam alay lamavas. All their plotting on me to have me killed. Oh, that makes sense, because a married woman, when you commit adultery, is a chiva misa. But according to the one that they suspected him from a zaina, ma'ila mavis, what type of death is there over here? Having relations with a single a woman that's a zaina, so there's no misa. So what was this plotting? So the Gemara says that's actually was something else. That's just l'chul be'ertit. They threw him into a pit of lime, of mud, and that they tried to kill him that way, not through the legal system, but actually with the mob system, whatever it is, some other way. Now, the end of that pasuk, Darish Rava, he says, "Ma'adir said, what does it mean over there? You muchshalm lefanecha. May they stumble in front of you." This is Yirmiyah Navi davening. At the time of your anger, you should do to them. What does this mean? Yirmiyah said in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rebbeinu Shalom, ask the world, even at a time when they are doing charity. How do you see this in the pasuk? So Taisa explains that the word lefanecha, which is what the pasuk says, refers to charity, because there's a pasuk in Yeshaya that says "B'halach lefanecha tzidkecha." So you see the idea of charity being mentioned over here. That even when they're doing tzedakah, cause them to stumble with people that are not upstanding, that they should not receive rewards. A very interesting tefillah that he had. That even if they're doing tzedakah, I don't want them to have such reward, and therefore that was the tefillah. Now, in the pasuk that we mentioned before, it says that v'chaved asolei b'maisai, that they did by Chizkiah Melech, they did an honor for him when he died. What does this mean? Yeshiva al kivra. This comes to teach us that they established a yeshiva on his gravesite, with Talmidim learning over their Torah, which Tosfos points out that not literally on his grave. It must have been a distance of Daled Amis, because you don't want to have loig l'rash. You're not allowed to learn by a grave. But Tosfos explains because he increased Torah learning in Klal Yisrael, as the Gemara says in Achelik, that they checked from Dan till Beersheba, they didn't find a man, a woman, a child, a little girl that wasn't Baki and Tumah Tahara, so they proliferated Torah learning by establishing yeshiva on his grave. Now, Pligi about Reb Nassan b'Rabbanan. Machlek Reb Nassan b'Rabbanan. Chadam Shleisha. One says for 3 days they made a yeshiva over there. One says shiva for 7 days. Some say with Shleishim it was for 30 days. Now, regarding the pasuk that we said before, so the Gemara says, that they made an honor for him when he died. So, like we said, Zechizki Melch Yehuda, this refers to Chizkiah, the king of Yehuda, which Rashi says that's just the wording of the Gemara. It's not really coming to tell us that it's Chizkiah because the pasuk explicitly mentions Chizkiah. It's just parenthetical because we're coming to explain what the honor did they do from when he died. So we're just giving that introduction. But it says Sheyatzu Lefanav, that they went out in front of him. Shleishim b'shisha elef. They were 36,000, and as Taisa points out, because the word loy that it says over there is the numerical value of 36. 36,000 chalutze kasaf, those who bared their shoulder, where they tore their garments until you could see their shoulders. That's the Rabbi Yehuda. That's what an honor they did for him. Now, Amalei Rabbi Nechemiah says, but v'haloi lefnei achav asukein. Didn't they do the same thing in front of Achav? So what's this? Why would it be considered as a great honor if they did the same thing for Achav? Where they also made a great hesped, as the Gemara says in Megillah, that they did. Now, even though, as Tosfos brings, Bavoid Yersham Rina, that's the death of Achav, who was wicked, you're supposed to sing and not mourn, that was for the Tzaddikim Shabbatar, but his servants and his friends, they mourned them also. So this can't be the great honor that they did for Chizkiah HaMelech. So rather, it must be that they put a Sefer Torah on his coffin. They said, that's the great honor they did for him. That they said, this one fulfilled what's written over here. So Gemara says, that's the great honor? But in today's times, we do the same thing also. Says Gemara, no, afuke mafkina. We take out a Sefer Torah in front of a great person, but to put it on the coffin, loy manichan, that we don't do. Which Sheish actually asks. The Gemara in Moed actually says, you're not allowed to sit on the same place as a Sefer Torah. So how are they allowed to put it over here? So he says that Chizkiah is different because he was a gadol of a Torah, meitzim tov meyos, and therefore that was permitted. Or v'ibais im, if you want, you could say a different shot. That actually we also put the Sefer Torah on the great Talmid Chacham, but kaim lemin, we don't say that he fulfilled whatever is written over here. Now Amar Bava Kama says, Zilna b'hadid Rabbi Yochanan. Says, I was walking with Rabbi Yochanan Lemishal Shmaita to ask him about this teaching. When he was going into the restroom. And I wanted to ask him something, but he didn't answer us at the Masha Yad until he washed his hands. He put on tefillin, he made a bracha on it. And then he told us, no, a filikaim amrin, it's not true. We even say, we take out the Sefer Torah, we put it on the Talmid Chacham, and we even say he fulfilled what's written over here. But limud lo yamin. But we don't say that he learned it all. But by Chizkiah we say he learned it all. But today's times we don't, because of the honor of Chizkiah, to show that learning is bigger than fulfilling. Says Gemara, really? Learning the whole Torah is bigger than fulfilling the whole Torah? But the master says elsewhere in Gemara Megillah, God the limud Torah. The learning of Torah is great because because learning brings to action. Obviously, you see, action is greater than learning. That's how Rashi explains it. Rein Tam says to the contrary. From here, the Gemara in Kedushin tells us that learning is greater than action. And as that question was asked, what's greater, learning or action? And they all said learning is greater because it brings to action. You see, it's greater than action. So Rein Tam says that the question is that that if you don't learn, how you give me Mekayim? Because learning brings to action. And the Gemara here didn't yet entertain what we're going to say in a moment, the difference between learning and teaching. So that's the discussion regarding. But according to Rashi, the Gemara's question is, what do you mean? Action is greater. So why are you saying that we say the guy fulfilled it, but he didn't learn it? So Gemara's like, no, it's not difficult because hola migmer. One is regarding learning for yourself. That doing is bigger than learning yourself. But hola agmure. But to teach others, that's greater than doing, and therefore we don't say limaid, not lomad, but limaid. We don't say that he taught this to others. We'll say he fulfilled it, which includes for sure learning it, because if you didn't learn, you don't know how to fulfill it. But to teach, that we don't say. That was only said by the great honor by Chizkiah HaMelech. Now, related discussion, the Gemara brings up says, "It wasn't a pasuk in Yeshaya. Ashreichem zoydei. How fortunate you who plant," which that refers to tzedakah and chesed, as we're going to say later on. I'll call mime on all water. The one who sends forth the legs and the ox, the legs of the ox and the donkey. So this refers to whoever toils and tiring he merits to the inheritance of two tribes. which that's what the pasuk is telling us, that your legs you'll send forth into the inheritance of the shar and the chamar, who refers to Yosef and Yisachar, because Yosef we know is called shar, like Bechar Shar Hardaloi, and Yisachar is explicit in the pasuk chamar garam loy. Like it says in the pasuk, Ashreichem Zayir, how fortunate are you who plant. Now, what's planting? Vein Zirei Tzedakah. Planting is charity. Like it says the pasuk in Isaiah, it says Ziru Lechem L'Tzedakah. Plant for yourself for charity, and Kitchu Lefi Chesed, and then you harvest according to the kindness. And Ve'ein Mayim Elatecha. And water is, so it's saying whoever's Isik and Ter Gimas Chasadim, because Gimas Chasadim is alluded to in Zayrei, and I'll call Mayim, Ve'ein Mayim Elatecha. As we know, famously, water is referred to Tashnam. Like says, whoever's thirsty, go to the water, refers to Torah. And that's what's saying that he merits to the inheritance of two tribes. That's alluded to in Regel Hashem Chamar, which is Shar is Yosef and Chamar is Yisachar. What's these two inheritances? So he merits to the canopy like Yosef. The Chassidus says the pasuk in Bereshit, Ben Peiris Yosef, a charming son was Yosef. Bonai Sada, sure the girls they would jump onto the wall, which to see Yosef, that's the kila, that's the canopy that he was covered with this wall. And Mezeichel Nachlas Yisachar also merits the inheritance of Yisachar. That's like says the pasuk in Bereshit, Yisachar Chamagarim. Yisachar was a strong-boned donkey, which Targum translates Ater Benichsin. He's wealthy in his assets. So if someone does chesed and learns Torah, he's going to be zeicha to be protected from the evil eye, and he's going to have wealth of assets. Those that say that oivav neifel in front of Yosef, his enemies fall in front of him like Yosef. That's like it says in the pasuk in the bottom, that behem with them, meaning with his horns, that he's being blessed over there by Moshe Rabbeinu, Shebed Yosef, amim yenagach yachtav, the people together, he's going to gore them, afsi aretz, the edges of the earth, and v'zeichel labina ki Yisachar, and he married to understanding like Yisachar. That's what it says in the Biyam Aleph. Yisachar, from the sons of Yisachar, Yoidi bin Leitim, they were the ones who know the understanding for the times. Ladas Mayas Yisrael, to know what the Jewish people should do, and that's what a person zeicha if he learns Torah and does Gimas Chasadim. Hanlach Arba Avos, we shall return to the first paragraph. It says Bava Kama Arba Avos, which spoke about the four mazikin of Shur, Ba, Mava, and Heva, and which be all bizaychataka like yinagach yachtav, that's ending with the term of negicha, but in a good way that we should be destroy our enemies, should be neifel lefanav in the schos of our liman Torah. Thank you for any time hosting us.